In August 1945, a new era of warfare unfolded as the world witnessed the devastating power of nuclear bombs. On the 6th and 9th of that month, American bombers dropped the Little Boy and Fat Man bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively. The primary objective was to compel Imperial Japan to surrender, which they eventually did on the 15th of August, effectively ending the deadliest conflict in human history with a death toll exceeding 70 million. Hiroshima, being a vital hub for manufacturing and military command, was the first city chosen for destruction by the atomic bomb. Its significance was further amplified by the presence of Field Marshal Shunriko Hata's headquarters. Approximately 350,000 people resided in Hiroshima, living in densely packed wooden-roofed houses. Conversely, Nagasaki, with its shipyards, steelworks, and manufacturing centers, was selected as the second target. Unlike Hiroshima, where most buildings were made of concrete, Nagasaki primarily consisted of tightly packed wooden structures. It is estimated that around 260,000 people were present in Nagasaki at the time of the bombing. In the early morning of August 6, 1945, a modified Boeing B-29 Super Fortress named Enola Gay soared over Hiroshima. At 8:15 a.m., the Little Boy bomb was parachuted down and detonated around 2,000 feet above the city. The resulting blast, equivalent to approximately 12 to 15,000 tons of TNT, claimed the lives of at least 80,000 men, women, and children instantaneously. In the subsequent days, the Japanese government grappled with the devastating aftermath of Hiroshima's destruction. Efforts were made to avoid the Soviet Union's declaration of war against Japan, including the distribution of leaflets in various Japanese cities warning of the Soviet Union's imminent involvement. However, these attempts failed, leaving Japan with the ultimatum that the Soviet Union would declare war on August 9th. On the morning of August 9th, while the Japanese government convened in Tokyo to discuss conditional surrender, a modified B-29 bomber known as Boxcar approached Nagasaki. Similar to the first bomb, the Fat Man nuclear bomb detonated some 1,600 feet above the city. The immediate aftermath claimed the lives of anywhere between 40,000 to 75,000 individuals. The following day, on August 10th, Japanese civilian and military leaders gathered to consider whether to accept the Potsdam Declaration's terms for full and unconditional surrender. Emperor Hirohito, breaking from the tradition of the emperor's non-interference in government decisions, expressed his willingness to accept the declaration while hoping to retain his title as sovereign. Meanwhile, plans for additional nuclear strikes were devised by the Americans. However, Japanese media leaks regarding Japan's unconditional surrender altered the course of events. American Secretary of State James Burns responded to Emperor Hirohito's request to retain power by asserting that the Allied powers would assume control and allow the Japanese people to determine their form of governance. Faced with the uncertainty of his position, Hirohito pressed his government to surrender. A failed military coup ensued, and Japan formally surrendered on August 15, 1945, effectively ending the bloodiest conflict in human history. Nonetheless, it is crucial to acknowledge the immediate and long-term effects suffered by those directly impacted by the nuclear bombings. In the seconds, days, and years following the detonation, a multitude of horrors unfolded. In the initial moments of the bomb's detonation, an intense release of infrared energy seared exposed skin for miles. The internal organs of living creatures within the blast radius vaporized instantly. Neutrons and gamma rays began to permeate the ground, heralding the onset of ionizing radiation, which would claim countless lives in the days that followed. The blast wave, traveling at speeds of up to 7,000 miles per hour, wreaked havoc, obliterating buildings and propelling shards of glass and debris that inflicted severe injuries upon unfortunate individuals caught in its path. A telltale mushroom cloud formed, visible for miles, bearing witness to the unimaginable destruction. Between the two bombings, approximately 150,000 people perished instantaneously. The dire situation was compounded by the devastating toll on medical personnel. The majority of doctors in Hiroshima were killed or injured in the blasts, leaving only 3 of the 45 hospitals unaffected. This scarcity of medical resources exacerbated the crisis that unfolded. While tens of thousands succumbed to immediate injuries, slower and insidious deaths were yet to come. By the 4th day, those initially treated for apparent burns began to exhibit peculiar symptoms. The affected individuals developed purple spots all over their bodies, experienced excessive bleeding even from minor cuts or injections, and vomited a foul brown liquid. Clumps of hair fell out at the slightest touch, as necrosis took hold. At the time, doctors were unaware that they were witnessing the effects of radiation sickness, an incurable condition that plagued those closest to the blast's epicenter. Many who sought water from nearby rivers, unknowingly contaminated by radiation, suffered further complications. Some even attempted to consume the oily black rain from the mushroom cloud, only to realize that they were ingesting the atomized remains of their city and fellow citizens. The intense heat and light emitted by the nuclear bombs left lasting imprints on the victims. Clothing patterns were seared onto their skin, and superheated wristwatches became branding implements for those who wore them too close to the epicenter. Individuals who directly gazed at the initial blinding flash of the nuclear strike were left permanently blind, while others developed cataracts and gradually lost their eyesight. However, it is highly likely that many people experienced severe burns, enduring excruciating deaths as their flesh melted away. Over the subsequent 2 to 4 months, the aftermath of the bombings claimed the lives of an estimated 90,000 to 146,000 individuals in Hiroshima and 39,000 to 80,000 in Nagasaki. The toll continued to rise as many succumbed to severe burns, radiation sickness, and various other injuries inflicted by the blasts. The dire conditions, exacerbated by rampant illness and lack of food, further exacerbated the suffering. Notably, a significant number of Korean laborers were present in both cities, and it remains impossible to determine the extent of entire families wiped out, leaving no survivors to report the deaths. The health ramifications extended beyond the immediate aftermath. Pregnant women exposed to the bombings faced higher rates of miscarriages and infant mortality. Those who did give birth often had children with intellectual disabilities, impaired growth, and increased susceptibility to cancers. Leukemia cases, in particular, spiked around 2 years after the bombings and remained elevated for approximately 6 years, predominantly affecting young children. The bombings are believed to have increased leukemia instances by nearly 50% by the mid-1950s. Other forms of cancer, such as thyroid, breast, and lung cancers, also surged. It is worth mentioning that a select few individuals, dubbed dual survivors, managed to survive both bombings. One notable example is Tsutomu Yamaguchi, who was in Hiroshima on a business trip during the first blast and then returned to his home city of Nagasaki. Although he lived a long life, his experience left him with radiation burns and subsequent health issues. To this day, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki stand as the only instances of nuclear strikes on populated areas. While nuclear arsenals have proliferated since then, and the destructive capabilities of these weapons have increased exponentially, the horrors endured by Hiroshima and Nagasaki serve as a stark reminder of the incomprehensible toll inflicted on humanity. As we navigate an uncertain future, marked by geopolitical tensions, we can only hope that Hiroshima and Nagasaki remain the sole reminders of the devastating consequences of a nuclear strike.